Hi there. What I want to do with this one is encourage you lot with this growing scarcity of certain items and provisions in our supermarkets, and the predictions of global food shortages. I just want to encourage people who are starting to worry about how we're going to cope in the coming weeks and months and in the future, and are struggling with believing that our Father in heaven is going to provide for all our needs. Particularly with the knowledge that ultimately we're going to have to deal with the Antichrist system. I'm going to call it what it is. The satanic New World Order, one world economic system, everything that's depicted and talked about in Revelation chapter 13, under which, assuming that you don't assimilate into this system and that you don't take the mark, whatever that precisely turns out to be, we are denied anything. We won't have access to any money. We won't even be able to work because there will be no way of paying us. We won't be a part of society. So how will we survive? Well, Father has promised that he will supply all our needs. So shelter, food, warmth. And I just want to share a couple of testimonies of my own to encourage people in this. The first testimony goes back to the time when, as I said in my previous video, the things are not going back. It's not going back to how it was. When I mentioned that 20 years ago I had walked away from the church, and was gone back to my previous lifestyle and was not walking in obedience. So there was at one point during this time, and this would have been about 8 or 9 years ago, I was living in a little caravan on the edge of some woods, out in the middle of nowhere, pretty much, and I was working through employment agencies. Now, agencies cannot guarantee continuous payment, or continuous work, sorry, and even though a work assignment might last several weeks, there can be 2 or 3 or more weeks between work assignments, and therefore you have to be sensible with your money and make provision for those times when you're not working. And you have to, me personally, I didn't like claiming unemployment benefit or welfare, and so I was surviving off of my savings. Now, whilst I was living in this caravan, I needed 100 British pounds a week to live, and that would cover my food, a nominal rent for my caravan because it belonged to a friend of mine, petrol for my motorbike, and some tobacco because I was smoking back then. Now, because it's the agency who pays you and not the workplace, every time there was a gap between assignments, when I got back to work, I would need to again work 2 weeks before getting any money from the agency, which meant that I would need £200 to survive the 2 weeks before I got paid again. Now, this is the testimony. Every time, without fail, that my bank balance dropped to around about £200, the agency would phone me up and say that they'd got more work for me. Every time. And after the first couple of times, I realised and began to acknowledge who was doing this. It was my Father in heaven keeping his promise to supply all my needs, and remembering that I wasn't walking in obedience and I wasn't praying at this time, but still he was looking after me. So that's the first testimony. The second one was about 2 years ago, and this was after our Father had brought me back to faith, which he did about this time 5 years ago. Well, I was working in a place that I'd worked before previously, but it was the second time I'd worked here, and I was not happy with the place. The work situation had got worse, but more than anything, the guy who owned the business was not a godly man. He was not a moral man, and I couldn't in good conscience continue to work for a man whose dealings were corrupt. Not to put too fine a point on it, he was corrupt and immoral in his dealings. So I handed in my notice without another job to go to, and I signed up again with the agency. And I didn't work. I didn't get any work. And I didn't get any work, and I continued to not get any work from the agency. Now, if you remember in my previous video, I had said that the premise on which Father had brought me back to faith was this revelation that we didn't have a lot of time left, that we were living in the days depicted in the book of Revelation, that Yeshua, Jesus, was going to be coming back soon. And I had been telling people that very soon we were going to have to rely totally on the Father for everything. Absolutely everything. Well, hang on to that for a minute. I eventually, after 3 months of not having any work and my bank balance getting lower and lower and lower, I found a job online that was tailor-made for me, and it was part-time, 2.5 days a week, 18 hours a week, And I applied for it. I was shortlisted, went for interview, and I got the job. And I started work in the middle of a month. And this was a salaried job, so I was going to get paid at the end of that week, that month, after working for 2 weeks, which, being 2.5 days a week, was going to amount to effectively 1 week's work, which meant that I would have to work the whole of the next month on effectively 1 week's salary. Well, I borrowed a couple of hundred quid off my mother, and I was just going to manage to do that, work through a month on £300 or thereabouts. Well, the added problem was that my car insurance was due for renewal in 2 months' time. Or just over a month's time, actually, I think. And there was absolutely no way I was going to be able to get the money together for to renew my insurance. And I was travelling a total of 40 miles a day to get to and from work. So, remembering that what I said about me telling everybody that a time was coming when we would have to rely entirely on him, I sensed Father saying to me, "All right, son, you've been telling people this. How about putting it into practice?" So I prayed lots, consistently, about this insurance money for my car. And basically my prayer wasn't, "Oh, please, Father, please, 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 Father, provide the money." No, I was holding him to his word. And I was basically saying, "Father, you gave me this job, and I need my car to get to work. So if you want me to continue, you're going to have to provide me with the insurance money. It's your problem," basically. And I don't think I was being disrespectful in that. I was holding him to his promise, reminding him of his promises, like he instructs us to in his word. I was reminding him of his promise to supply all our needs. Well, there came a day when I was in a supermarket and I got this funny text from my friend in London, and I called her back, and we were chatting, and she gleaned from our conversation that money was a bit tight for me. I didn't tell her anything about the car insurance or anything, and she said, "Well, I know what, Ed. The benefits office have messed up have been underpaying me my sickness benefit. She's ill, she can't work, and she said they've been underpaying me for years to the tune of several £1,000s. So text me your bank details and I'll transfer £500 into your bank account." Well, there was me, stood in the middle of this supermarket with tears streaming down my face, telling her that that was going to pay for my car insurance. My car insurance renewal was going to be about £400 or £500. So she said, right, well, text me your bank details, I'll go straight down the bank and transfer it over. I get home from the supermarket and a text comes through on my phone from my bank. And I open up the text and it's a notice saying that £1,000 has been credited to my account. My lovely friend Zizi had put £1,000 into my bank account. That £1,000 not only paid for my car insurance renewal, but it also enabled me to pay back the £200 that I'd borrowed off my mother. It also enabled me to give £100 to a very good friend of mine who regularly struggles to make ends meet. And a few days later I had a minor accident in my car. I went into the back of a car coming off at a motorway junction, and instead of claiming off my insurance to fix my car, because it was a really old car and I knew the insurance company would just write it off, what was left over from that £1,000 paid for the spare parts I needed from eBay, and also paid for my garage, my service station, to fit the parts. So my Father in heaven not only provided the money for my insurance renewal, but he covered everything else. And not just that, he covered the costs of what was going to happen. So I hope that that has encouraged you not to worry about what is coming, but to trust and believe that our wonderful Father really is going to look after us. Yeah. So, till next time, Shalom and keep safe.